Excellent, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nikki Sims-Chilton, and I'm a Board Director on Women in STEM Australia, and I'm here with my colleagues Anita Trenwith, Sarah Chapman, and Hara Hussaini. Hara Hussaini, I'm going to say it right because I have been practicing and then I just ruined it. My apologies, Hara. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands on which we all meet today, which is all across the country, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and also acknowledge our First Nations people as our first scientists, our first communicators, and our first networkers. A little bit of housekeeping for today's online panel. The chat is enabled, however, we won't really be taking questions unless we have time at the end. All of you, when you registered, provided us a bunch of questions that we're going to address here today. So hopefully we get to cover everything. If we don't, you can send us an email after this, and we'll provide our contact details at the end. And we have a lot to cover in the hour, so I will try and keep our panelists on time. And without further ado, I think we might get started. So I will share my screen and introduce our panel to you. We don't have many slides, so I know there are a few people listening on their drive home and things like that, so there's actually not many slides here. You'll just hear us talking, which is good. So just a little bit of background. At Women in STEM Australia, we aim to connect, empower and advocate for STEM women and girls to have equality in the Australian workplace. So running events like this, we hope to continue supporting women and girls in STEM. And if you have any further ideas about what we can do to support women and girls in STEM, please feel free to contact us. We were founded in 2014 and we're a not-for-profit organisation, and all of us are volunteers in these roles. So we're all very passionate about supporting women and girls in STEM. Now over to our lovely panel. I'm going to ask them all to tell me and you a little bit about themselves and their networking journey. So Sarah, we're going to start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's very lovely to be here. I'm co-chair of Women in STEM Australia, and my journey started with a science degree in regional North Queensland and got to meet a range of scientists through my study, but also my honours research. I then went on to study and become a secondary science teacher, and through that met a broad range of people. And in terms of my networking journey, it was both with professional STEM experts and researchers, but also STEM teachers, and have now founded a business called STEM Changemakers that really runs on the back of networking and partnerships to facilitate engagement for underrepresented regional and rural girls. And the value of networking through this program is intertwined, but also the most pinnacle part of the program to showcase connection, but also the value of connection. So I'm a big fan, and also still learning. So can give you a range of perspectives.
Thanks, Sarah. Anita.
So, hi everyone. So my background is science teaching, and so I started in a fairly traditional go to university, study science teaching, went into the classroom, was quite naturally, I'm a little bit introverted, and my work was very much just insular in the classroom. And I kind of got my first experience of networking when my coordinator said, you should apply for this award. And I did, not thinking anything. When I won it, I was thrust into this environment where I suddenly had to network with people. And I was very much out of my depth, but it was a great opportunity because the real learning and growths, your real learning and growth opportunities come when you jump out of your comfort zone. And that's what happened to me. I was sort of pushed out of my comfort zone. And as a result, I actually discovered the advantage of being in these situations to network with people that was able to, I guess, project me into different opportunities to increase STEM skills for students and eventually with teachers. I now work in university within STEM education and work with not just the students, but also with teachers and tertiary links as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Anita. Hara.
Hi everyone, I'm Hara. I'm a control systems engineer. I work in the resources and energy sector in WA, and I've been in the industry for about 10 years now. I'm an avid STEM advocate, and my networking journey certainly didn't start out as awesome. It was certainly awkward. That's something that I dreaded. But as an engineering student, um, if you don't network, you won't get an internship. So I started networking as a student, and it was the most awkward experience. And it was with the goal purpose of securing an internship or securing a role. But fast forward to now, 10 years into the industry, my mindset shifted from it's not an awkward exercise, it's something I can approach with the goal of building meaningful relationships or about cultivating authentic relationships. And that's how I actually got my current role through a networking opportunity. And I'm excited here to share tips and tricks of how I turned it from being awkward and something I dread to something I dread a little bit less.
Thanks, Hara. Your mic is cutting in a little bit in and out there, so I don't know if it's just me. I just thought I'd let you know if you needed to adjust. Thank you all for your introductions. Very knowledgeable people here who'll be able to share some tips and tricks this afternoon. Now, I just wanted to share one little quote about your network being your net worth. So your network is so important to your career going forward. So hopefully some of the tips and tricks that we offer today will help you build that network going forward. I will stop sharing my screen now and we'll get into the rest of the discussion. So I'm going to ask the panel now to tell me about their biggest learning from their networking experiences. And Anita, we might start with you this time.
So I guess mine continues on to my example where I sort of mentioned that I started my networking journey. I was kind of thrust into it by winning this Science Excellence Award. And as a result, I ended up at a table I didn't know people. I sort of was quite insular. I was in my classroom doing my job and I just thought it was normal, but other people seemed to think it was a little bit more interesting than that. And then I had this opportunity to be at this awards night. I didn't even realise that I was sitting at the table with the South Australian chief scientist at the time. That was how insular I was. And so it was that rapid learning curve of actually realising this is an opportunity to get to know people, having to learn who they are. And the one thing I have learned from that is if you ever get the opportunity to go to an event like that, it's a good idea to do a bit of homework to try and find out who is actually going to those events and learn a little bit about them, because that would have been made the connection a lot easier if you have to talk to people that you don't know, if you have a little bit of background information about them. But I guess that was sort of where my journey started, and it was that opportunity to realise how beneficial it can be. And that was about 15 years ago, 16 years ago now. So yeah, it's been a journey since then.
Excellent. Thanks, Anita. I'm going to throw to you, Hara, but before I do, I just thought it might be worth if people would like to put in the chat how they feel about networking. What's, one word to describe how you feel about networking while you're thinking about that. Hara, would you like to share your biggest learning from networking?
One of my biggest learnings about networking, and this was a slow realization starting out as a student, is the goal is not to meet everyone in the room. I remember one of my very early networking events that I attended. I was still a student at the time. I was so focused on meeting people. I was literally going from circle to circle, having 2-minute conversations. Hi, I'm Hara. What do you do? To the point where I ended up in the same group without realizing it. I reintroduced myself, and by the time I got to the second person, I was like, "Oh, we've already met." And you can imagine how awkward that was. I was trying visibly not to cringe, but in that moment, what I did was just share. I was open and honest about how I felt. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so nervous. This is one of my biggest learning events, and that was met with, understanding. And I'm like, oh, it's okay, I understand. Have you been to other networking events? So they sort of alleviated that. They understood, which is important to remember because, in networking events, some people might be feeling just as awkward as you are. But just that bit about being honest and open, I didn't want to make it more awkward, I just openly and shared what I was feeling. Yeah, and the conversation went on from there.
Excellent. Thanks, Hara. That's a great example. Sarah, over to you. And just before you start, we've got a fair few people saying awkward, nervous, unsure. So were you feeling awkward, nervous, and unsure? And what have you learnt from those situations?
Absolutely. When I started networking, sort of very similar to Anita in terms of being thrust into an environment that was quite unexpected and also quite intimidating in terms of the stature of a lot of the people in the room. And pretty much in the early days, I became very interested in, the pot plants in the corner, how interesting the leaves were, looking very, interested in my plate with my teacup on it or whatever, and just really being angry and frustrated at myself that I couldn't move past my nerves, the awkwardness, my anxious feelings in my stomach, and just feeling quite silly about the fact that I just felt like, yeah, I had a red nose on or something, just stood out, but also didn't want to be there at the same time. And unfortunately, new things, when you go into uncomfortability and new experiences, you're going to feel like that. It's a stretch zone. To learn something, it's going into that stretch zone. And I still have moments when we were preparing for this panel, I mentioned meeting Australia's only female astronomer earlier this year. And I was so overwhelmed with meeting her that I burst into tears. Now, I've been networking for over 20 years, and sometimes you still have moments that you wish you could be swallowed up by the floor. My greatest and biggest learning, though, is firstly, I'm a lover of learning. And being in the field of STEM, you're always going to learn something from others. So always assume you're not the most interesting person in the room. There's always other people that are more interesting. So don't go up and start talking about yourself. Ask people about them and ask them what they do and what their perspectives are. And like Hara said about, start with, is this your first networking event? Have you been to one of these before? Even make a joke and say, gee, every time I come to these things, I get quite nervous. I've even cried in front of an astronomer. Sorry, I should say astronaut, not an astronomer. But always assume you're the least interesting person in the room, that there's an opportunity to learn, and don't just blab on about what you're about, learn what others are about, and that makes networking so much more rewarding.
Thanks, Sarah. And that's such a great story. I love it. Even it's only the second time I've heard it. I still love
Yeah,
it. So
and I
thank you for
still get
sharing.
blushed when I talk about it.
Oh, I want to be the person who, receives the crying stakeholder in the room. Thank you. So you've obviously all got to this point in your career by having some successes in networking. Can we talk about what, an example or some tips around successes in networking? And Hara, I might throw to you first on this one.
Yep. I think one of the biggest things that's worked for me, especially coming from industry, is before every networking event, it'll definitely pay off and it'll be worthwhile spending some time and effort into planning and preparation. So reading up on the event, understanding who the organization that's running it is, and the attendees even. This gives you an idea about, what type of questions to prepare, what to expect, and it can alleviate some of that stress and anxiety before you go into the event. And another thing that's particularly worked for me is I read up on a few big projects or what's the latest happening in the industry. And if you do your reading and planning about the event, it's bound to come up in a conversation. You might overhear it, and that might be your cue to join that group, or you might bring it up yourself. This shows, you're staying abreast of your industry. It shows something that you're passionate about. You might even learn some new things about the project for me, having prepared, I've learned new things. I've been connected with different teams. I've been connected with vendors and suppliers, just talking about projects as well. Um, so I think that's quite successfully worked for me coming from industry.
Yeah, great. So being prepared is your tip, I guess, and making sure you know who's in the room and what the kind of topical areas are in that space. Good suggestions there, Hara. Anita, what about you? What are some successes you've had?
So I think one of the things that I find that helps is taking all the other stresses out before you have to do the networking. So making sure you arrive at the event early, you know what rooms you have to go to so that you're not in that last minute panic or arriving into a room 1 minute after everyone else and you need to try and work out where to sit. Even things like checking the dress code before you go so that you're not arriving dressed, overdressed or underdressed when compared to everybody else, just to make sure that you're not creating other things that can make it even more stressful when you're at that event. The other thing when starting out is, if possible, take a friend with you if you're really nervous, is actually take someone with you because it's a lot easier to network when you've got someone with you and you're not standing there awkwardly, or read the room and find the other person that's standing there without other people with them who might actually really embrace the fact that somebody's coming up to them to talk to them, and that can break down that initial introduction and make it a lot easier. Oh, I've got someone to talk to, and you feel more comfortable because we are naturally social people that like to be around other people, especially when we're in events like that. But I think you learn lots of things over the years, and I've been involved in these sort of things for a long time. But one of the things that I think is very handy now is even on social media, we have, you can replace doom scrolling with looking up some people that share they are experts in their field and they share tips that can make you more comfortable at networking events. So there's Vanessa Van Edwards, for example. So she's a body language specialist. And so if you watch her tips and tricks, she talks about um, how to present yourself so you look more confident, and basically if you don't feel confident, how to convince yourself you do. But even if you can't do it, you can learn some tricks from that, how to read other people and read the room better to recognize when, okay, I think it's time to sort of move from this conversation to somewhere else. Then there's Bing Jian, he's a speech expert. And so even just little tricks like when you're talking, if you're getting nervous, instead of saying replace it with a pause because you sound more professional and you sound more confident because you're not saying the or all the time. Record yourself and listen to yourself and analyze what you sound like, because that's really good for learning how you are presenting yourself. And then you can actually become conscious of things that you could improve. And the last one I'm going to mention is Jefferson Fisher. So he's a trial attorney and he goes through a lot of, he's a specialist with situations of how to deal with conflict, with new environments, with meeting people, all sorts of scenarios that can be useful in so many ways. So something as simple as when you're laying in bed, scrolling away, looking at reels, make it something useful by scrolling away and looking at some of these hints and tips because they're right there in front of you.
Thanks, Anita. Good advice. I should stop watching the cat and the cucumber videos and do something useful. Sarah, over to you. Any success stories?
I would definitely say context matters. So if you're at a conference or something like that and you want to meet a particular person that's presented, a great way to meet them is to bring up part of their presentation in order to form that initial connection. Or if you're at morning tea, lunch in that conference and a particular person was a highlight for you, talking to somebody new and saying, wasn't the Lego expert really good that spoke this morning at the conference, as a way of starting a conversation. In terms of, I guess, networking in general, the more you practice, the better you become. And as a teacher, having the awkward moments hiding behind a plant and picking at my cupcake and trying to avoid eye contact, I've actually, over my 20 years, run a lot of bringing in STEM experts to allow kids to practice networking. And I do that as a part of STEM Changemakers now as well. And practice when it doesn't count, in order that when you do get to meet, Australia's first astronaut, you don't burst into tears. But practice go along to an opportunity. It might be an afternoon tea. It might be a networking coffee. It might even be something online if you're really, really intimidated. And practice actually having a go. Practice when it doesn't count, so then you've had a go before it does. And to add to Anita's reshifting of your doom scrolling. Also, and with Hara doing the preparation, it's also really good if you know you're going to a particular event and there's people there that you have of interest. Look them up on LinkedIn, see what their interests are, what they've been posting about, connect with them beforehand, even send them a message and say, I'll be at such and such event. It'd be great to catch up and discuss blah, blah, blah that you've been posting about, or my interest of this. I'd love to hear more about your perspectives on whatever it might be. Making that connection beforehand means they might look out for you, but also you can sort of get to know them before you actually speak to them. You know, kind of like what they look like, although a lot of profile pics aren't necessarily up to date these days. But that research can sometimes just reassure you, and always going from the angle of use the context to assist you. So if it's more a general thing, don't be going in with a lot of specialist language. Maybe go from the, oh, have you been to this networking event before? If it's really in your field of expertise, you would then be looking at a lot of the people attending being of your same level. So you can be a bit more specific in terms of your conversation and particular area of interest. Say you're an engineer and you're going to an engineers conference, you might say, so what field of engineering do you work in? What are your interests? So starting general like that, but make sure that as well as reading the room, you relate to the context. So you get that part right when you start networking.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And you mentioned LinkedIn there. Now, I'm going to assume that maybe some people online don't have LinkedIn, but I'm seeing from all three of you mentioning LinkedIn that you think it's important for networking to have a LinkedIn profile. Yep, I'm
Yes.
getting nods, thumbs up. So, one thing you can do when you're at a networking event is share a QR code of your LinkedIn profile. And I do have a slide here just to show you how to do that because I forget every single time I'm at a networking event um, how to do this. But it's really simple. So, you open up your LinkedIn profile on your phone. You go to the search option, and there's a little square in the top right-hand corner of that search bucket um, banner. Click on that, and your QR code will appear, and you can share then that QR code with the person you're talking to then connect with you on LinkedIn, and that's a much easier way to do on the spot at the time than trying to remember their name at a later date. So hopefully that's helpful for you. The other thing I do is I snip my QR code and pop it into my CV so that when people read my CV, they have really quick access to my QR code, which then links to my LinkedIn profile. So having an up-to-date LinkedIn profile with a up-to-date photo, Sarah, is really important. There's some really high statistics from LinkedIn that say if you don't have a profile photo, you pretty much don't get looked at. So make sure you have one and it's not your cat in the photo, it's your face and it looks like you from 2025 and not 1995. So just some tips around LinkedIn there. All right, now we've got, as I said before, we've got a lot of experience in this room, but we haven't always been comfortable with networking, and sometimes we're probably still a little bit uncomfortable with networking. But how do you take the stress out of networking and boost confidence in yourself? Now, we've heard some examples about practicing and, you know, being there early and preparing. Is there anything else anyone wants to offer in that space? I'll let any of you jump in who would like to.
I'm happy to add to that a little bit. So
Thanks, Anita.
one of the things I guess that we often don't think about is the fact that anxiety and excitement are exactly the same physiological reaction in our body. The difference is how we breathe. When you're anxious, you tend to breathe very fast, and that convinces your brain in a sense that there's something to be nervous about, something's wrong, we need to get ready for that fight or flight response. But excitement is exactly the same thing. But when you're excited, we tend to breathe slower. So the biggest thing you can do is actually take deep breaths. There's a lot of science behind when you control your breathing, breathe in, count to 3, breathe out, count to 3. That can actually calm that anxiety feeling down, but you can still enjoy the excitement of the event. And you just even consciously remembering that it's excitement. Convince yourself. If you feel anxious, go, no, it's not anxiousness, it's excitement. Tell your brain that's what it is. And the other thing that I find really important about the success of networking, because I do find it, I honestly find it very draining when I have to go and meet people I don't know. I do get very exhausted by that. And especially if it's something like a 3-day conference, I can tell you now by day 3, I'm kind of getting to the stage where I'm like, I just want to hide. But taking time to recharge, and that could be as simple as, if you're finding yourself feeling drained, go and take a break, have a walk, go to the bathroom, catch your breath, come back, feel recharged. Or it could be, I'm going to go out for the first 15 minutes of the lunch break and just have some quiet space on my own, and then come back in, rather than trying to push yourself through when you're actually feeling that tiredness and that drain where it is. Because networking, especially while you're learning it, is exhausting.
Good advice, Anita. Thank you. Hara, do you have anything you want to add in boosting confidence?
No, that's a really good point, Anita. Like tricking your brain and instead of being anxious, oh, I'm excited instead. And I think it's a good point by putting what Sarah said. The more practice you have, the more you become comfortable with being uncomfortable. So if you start slow with like student events, for example, at uni, small workshops, or even the virtual webinars Sarah mentioned, you're really setting yourself up for good practice ground before you attend, bigger events, before networking with more senior people, perhaps. And another thing I'd like to add is the more practice you have, the more you want to be a little bit more intentional as well. You do For something I do is I set a goal for each event that I want to attend. So my goal today is to learn one new thing, is to meet at least one new person, and to have at least one meaningful conversation. That really takes the stress out of, I don't know who I'm going to meet here. I don't know who I'm going to bump into. But that also helps tailor your questions as well when you're asking, I want to learn something new. I'll ask this person about this project, or whether it's something interesting they're working on.
Yeah, good idea, Hara. Thank you. Sarah, anything else from you?
Yeah, I would say not necessarily a strategy, but to link in both of Anita and Hara's responses. A strategy I use, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, is to take most people, the person in the room they know the most is themselves. So to approach someone and ask them about themselves is a strategy in that they're going to start telling you something, which, if you're feeling nervous, gives you the time to calm your breathing while you're listening to them, which means that they're doing the hard work and you stand there. But the other part of networking isn't just about talking, it's about intentionally and carefully listening. Because realistically, it's not just meeting people, it's establishing a connection. And if you're just standing there going, and not actually listening, and I would have to say I'm terrible, someone will say their name, and I'm just that, and then I don't remember their name for the excitement and anxiousness of that moment. But having them talk means you can calm your breathing and allow a bit of an establishment of comfortability. You can adjust your body space around that person depending on how you're feeling in terms of comfortability. But it's also then becoming mindful to actually listen to what they're saying, because a lot of times you can tell whether people are just networking to network or actually genuinely trying to make a connection that will be reinforced at some stage. The value is that reinforcement. So it is really important to listen, and really important then to follow up, and also possibly to buy yourself more time if they say something, to ask a question. Oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Again, it allows you to calm, but it's establishing a connection with that person of, I am interested, I've listened and I've heard what you've said. you're not just trying to push them out of the way to tell them your thing. And I think genuine, enjoyable networking that builds my confidence, and it may be different for different people, is that reciprocation, the interest from both people, and where people ask questions, you've asked them, and then they reciprocate. If all it is I'm going to tell you everything that's good about me, that person's most likely going to feel overwhelmed and you forget the other part. So to me, the value is in learning about others, reciprocating that, but also making sure it's mindful listening. So then realistically, some of the networks I've met have changed my life. And if I hadn't listened to them and actually not to gain anything, but to learn, um, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I think to me, it's about the genuine connection and taking the time. If all you do is listen to people and never tell anybody about you, you still gain things, which to me is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Sarah, when you listen to someone and you hear, a personal anecdote or something about them and you use that next time you speak to them, so maybe they talked about their pet dog, and next time you ask about their pet dog, they know that you've genuinely listened and genuinely want to get to know them. And that's a really valuable way of making those connections. So even if you have to take a note when you finish the conversation, such and such has a dog called Joey, and then, you've got that. I'm sure GPs do that all the time when they ask about your family. They've got the notes in their files about you. So, and I think the other thing I want to add to what you were saying, Sarah, is how good are name tags?
Cool.
When you're organising an event, please provide name tags, or if you're at an event, make sure you put your name tag on because, yeah, like Sarah said, in the moment you often forget
Or
people's.
ask for a business card or their LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So it's a way of reinforcing that connection at that point in time. Don't go, I'll remember, because you most likely won't.
Correct.
Or maybe that's
Particularly,
just my age.
I was going to say the same thing, Sarah, particularly as you get into your 40s and 50s, you're probably more likely to forget. So excellent. Thank you for the advice. All right. Next question on my list is about the good old breaking into a circle. So you're standing at a networking event, maybe you're Sarah and you're hiding behind the plant, but you're seeing a circle that you want to break into. You've got your cup of tea in one hand, your scone on your plate. What are some tips on how to break into that circle, or how to have and what's the icebreaker question that you can kind of work your way into those circles? So, Hara, I might start with you on that question.
Yep. I think that's the most daunting part of
Mm.
networking. How do you break into a circle? How do you start a conversation? But before I get to what type of questions to ask or how to break in, um, we'll look at the body language and how to read the room to prepare yourself to ask for what type of questions to ask. So you'd always want to have, this might come as basics, but the open body language, the genuine friendly smile, and when you're approaching a big group, I sometimes like to listen in a little bit, kind of overhear what they're talking about, and then I can join in with, oh, did I hear you say that? It's interesting. I share a fact I know about what he's talking about. I sometimes like to walk around pretending that I'm looking for a group while I overhear conversation to see where I can best fit in or I can break in. But looking for little cues like that. But once you do approach a circle, I like to replace, how I started out. Oh, what do you do? The traditional questions with a little bit more insightful, an approach with curiosity. Um, so, for example, what's one of the most challenging things you've worked on recently? Or what's one of the most exciting projects? Or what's something you've achieved this week? It's more like open-ended questions where, they just give you a one answer. They're inclined to open up more. So that way you get to know a little bit more about what they do. You might learn about their passions, a little bit about, the shared values you might have. And that helps to build that connection on a deeper level.
Great. Thanks, Hara. Anita, any tips on breaking the circle?
I think one of the things to do is to remember that more people than you think are getting that sort of imposter syndrome feeling. There's a lot of people in the room that were like, we saw, we were asking before, what are people feeling about networking? And lots of people saying, oh, I feel nervous, anxious, worried, unsure about things. So when you're in a situation where you're trying to do networking and you're feeling nervous, chances are other people are as well. So it's a good reminder to go, well, imposter syndrome, it's not a lack of expertise, it's just a lack of experience. And so you want to make it as easy as possible to start. And the more often you do it, the easier it gets. And one of the things you can do is try and, you see someone, or you like was just said, you see a group and there's a bit of open body language. Walk up and go, hi, my name's Anita. Do you mind if I join your conversation? It's very unlikely they're going to say no unless it was obviously a conversation that's not appropriate to join. But the chances are they're going to, yeah, sure. And they might actually be a bit curious as to why you're so confidently saying, do you mind if I join in? And that makes things a lot easier. So something as simple as, the obvious can actually be quite useful.
Yeah. Thanks, Anita. Sarah, anything to add on that one?
Totally agree with Anita's. I've used that on occasion to make my way into a circle, or even at a conference where people are seated, like eating their lunch, and you don't know anyone, and there's a space there to say, do you mind if I sit here? And then ask about, oh, so how have you found the conference so far? What's been your favorite presentation? Why is it that way? Blah, blah, blah. If it's more high stakes people, you might find an event similar to what Anita was talking about, being thrust into an environment with lots of bigwigs, as I would refer to them. A lot of the bigwigs are generally very, very good at networking because they have to be, because they have hordes of people usually going up to them. And if you're really dead set on, meeting somebody in particular at an event, it's a matter of coming up, listening to the conversation, but also waiting your turn and being in a location where the person you're trying to meet can see you. There's no point standing behind and, them trying to, capture your radiation from behind you to know you were there. So position yourself where you can be seen and show that you're, partially listening to the conversation. If someone's weeping or something, obviously probably not the best time to be trying to join in, but be standing there and nodding. And I'm sort of talking, for example, a chief scientist, etc., like Anita mentioned before. Those people are used to meeting lots of people, and so waiting your turn in a visible area, they'll generally turn to include you in that conversation. But also if you are networking with them and it is someone you want to remember you, have the business card, the flyer, the prepared piece that you want to say in that instance in order to be comfortable, but also if that's your moment that you're ready for it. If you've gone there and you know that person's going to be there, I just read Howard's thing. Yeah, also don't approach someone when they're taking a bite of their scone. Or, you could and then have a little. I also find humour, you may have noticed with my examples, humour is a great way to break the ice. Trying to make a joke about something, even if it is, oh, I was going to wait 2 seconds earlier when you were taking a bite of that scone, anything like that, people will go, ha, and then you go, blah, 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 and start. Generally, yeah. Thanks for that, Harry. You made me feel a little bit more at ease.
Thanks, Sarah. Some great examples there. Interested in those online. If you wanted to write in the chat, if you've got any stellar icebreaker tips or questions that you ask to break the circle, because we might have years of experience, but we're certainly not the experts, and we're keen to learn from all of you as well. So please feel free to share those tips. So on the other side of that, you want to get out of the conversation. You've had a long conversation with someone, you're ready to move on. Maybe you've got your goal, as Hara said, of meeting 4 people today, and you're ready to move on. How do you politely exit the conversation. Sarah, you've got the mic at the moment, so I might go back to you.
Righto. Well, one reason as well that Nikki, being very kind, didn't add is unfortunately I seem to meet a lot of these people that do actually think they're the most interesting person in the room, which unfortunately sometimes isn't the truth. All in my personal perspective, they're not the most important person in the room. And you get stuck eating your scone, standing next to this person. And a lot of times you've heard everything from what grade they got in handwriting in grade 2 and how they proceeded from training wheels on a bike to riding a motorcycle or whatever it might be. And I really struggle with this, really struggle. And I, a lot of times, am very polite and will stand there and listen to the entire encapsulation of somebody's life. So this is an area that I am still working on. I do find, especially at conferences where the lunch is coming to an end, bathroom break is always a great excuse. Oh, sorry, I really need to go to the bathroom, or I really need to fill up my water bottle. If you do, however, use an excuse like that, don't not do those things because that person may see you in 2 seconds skipping along, getting an egg sandwich and, high-fiving the stall holders, and that not be necessarily a very good look. Or you could just say, oh, excuse me, I need to follow up a few things before the next session, or I've got an appointment or something like that, which is a little bit more vague. I'd be interested to hear from Anita and Hara as to their exit plans, because as I said, sometimes I've really wished I had an emergency chute, but it's okay. You live and you learn and you do survive. I am still alive.
Good to know. Thanks.
I
Anita?
actually have a very similar to that in light of what Sarah was just saying, but the comment about if you've said you're going to the bathroom and then you're seen talking to someone else. So one of the ones that I have is, oh, it's been fantastic talking to you. And you might share contact details. Can I get your contact details? I just have to go because I have to catch someone before the end of the lunch break. And then that gives you the freedom to kind of go, I need to catch someone before the end of the lunch break. Then if they do see you talking to someone else. But it is one of those awkward things. I can give an example of what not to do. And I've seen someone do this. And they were talking to someone about quite intently, very interested. And mid-sentence, somebody who they obviously perceived as more important walked into the room. And they just dropped this person mid-sentence, hey, and walked off to talk to the other person. And it was really awkward for that person who had been left hanging. And the person I was with and myself, we quickly sort of jumped over and said, oh, how are you going? And started talking to them because we could see they were quite shattered. So I guess just from that point of view, to make sure that the exit is not abrupt and rude, so that you're not giving that perception of, I found someone better to talk to.
Yeah, good advice. Thanks, Anita. Hara, what's your exit strategy?
For me, I think Sarah and Anita have. But to summarize, definitely don't invent an elaborate excuse. Keep it short, simple, and a genuine closing line. You do want to give a genuine reason. You'd want to leave a final positive impression so you can show gratitude, thank them for their time, connect. That's a good segue to get their contact details as well. Or you can also use, humor, like Sarah said. You say, my social battery's running out. Sorry, I've got to get time out. But I also wanted to mention the non-verbal cues that I spoke about earlier as well when exiting. I think there's something you can do yourself, or if you notice in others, when their speech starts to slow down or their tone softens a little bit, or they take, a very subtle step back, or they reposition their toes. That's if you do that, that's intent, shows the intent that, you want to move to the next conversation. And also about reading the body language of the person you're connecting with as well. If you notice any of those, signaling the end of the conversation, you can start not thinking of an elaborate excuse, but trying to wrap up the conversation.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Hara. And just on exiting, you've exited the conversation. How do you now maintain those relationships or those contacts that you've had with those people, Hara?
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I think one of the best networking, not just for preparation but also for maintaining. As Sarah mentioned earlier, when you're trying to build that genuine relationship with someone based on trust and respect, and that listening pays off, because when you're listening, you're paying attention to all the details, and you can use those details to then follow up with that person. Um, Oh, I really enjoyed hearing you talk about X, Y, Z. Do you mind? Would you mind if we connect over a coffee to discuss more? I'd like to hear your insights or learn more about you. Um, and the same has happened to me as well, where not I have followed up with people, but people have followed up with me and remembered details about myself. So I see the other perspective as well. And that's definitely something that, it's a relationship that's how I know it's a relationship worth building. It's a place, genuine connection and understanding and support.
Yeah. Great. Thanks. Sarah, how do you maintain those connections?
Well, firstly, I'd say in the world we live in, time is pretty much our currency. What you give your time to is what you value and see as important. So when you meet somebody, if they give you your time, they're actually giving you their currency. And if they follow up, if you're fortunate enough that someone connects with you afterwards with LinkedIn or emails you because you've given them your business card or scan LinkedIn and contacted you later, use that and remember that as a confidence booster, because again, they're giving you their time and energy to have validated you that they didn't have to. So know that then reciprocating that and doing the same thing, connecting on LinkedIn, if they give you a business card with their email on it, or if they're really old school, it may only be a phone number, contact them, because generally that business card they don't give out to everybody. A lot of times on LinkedIn, they won't have a genuine email. It might be just a Gmail or something that they check infrequently. So follow up with those things. And also, I'd add in some people might be with somebody else. So if it's a bigwig, they may have minders or advisors that are with them. Include them in your conversation, but also ask them for their contact details, because a lot of times they're just as important in the conversation. Or if you notice that someone's off to the side, include them, because you never know what value add there might be. But in terms of examples of some of my networking of people I met in my science degree, they are people that, let's just say, a couple of decades, I won't expand too much on how long ago that was, but decades later, I am still connected with these people, collaborating with them, running projects. So know that an initial connection with somebody, with an awkward, undergraduate university student as myself at the time, meeting somebody can lead to something if you be yourself, show your interest, but genuinely value the connection. Because I think a lot of times it's just to get, whereas I value add to go, well, how can I help you? I remember noted that you were working on X, Y, and Z. I was thinking I could contribute, or is there a way I can contribute? I really think it's a two-way street, as I mentioned. So whatever connection you follow up with, don't be, I'd like you to come here and do this. It's also, if I can add with this to you and value add your way, and thank you for your time, it's making sure it goes back to that person, because I think in the world that we live in, the mutual connection and the reinforcement of that is so very important that a lot of times it gets forgotten.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. And really good advice about advisors. Having been an advisor, it was my job to make sure I had those names and contact details and to contact that person at a later date. So please keep the advisors in the loop with, your contact details if you're speaking to someone of that caliber. Anita, Any further advice?
Yeah, it's been covered very well. I guess the one thing I would add is if you've been talking to someone at a networking event and you have had a conversation and said, oh, I'll send through that document or that link or photo, make sure you do it. Follow up and do it in a timely manner to show that you are serious about it, because otherwise it does feel like it was just a conversation of lip service. And you also, if you then follow it up 3 weeks later and you send that link through, then the moment's gone. They might not even remember what the conversation was. So keeping responses in a timely manner and following up on things that you say that you're going to do to make sure that you're keeping to the plan.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anita. Now, as the panel chair here, I have the exit strategy. But firstly, I want to just share back my point at the start around your network is your net worth. And I think you've heard a lot today about how valuable your network is and how to establish and maintain those networks. So I'd like to thank our panel for their insights today. And on behalf of Women in STEM Australia, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I have one slide left that I'd like to share. I will flash up the LinkedIn slide again in case you missed it earlier, but we will send recording/slides out, and please note that panel. We need to follow up and make sure we do that in a timely manner, but thank you all for joining us. Now, my last slide is about our STEM Strolls. So STEM Strolls are another event that we organise as Women in STEM Australia, and it aims to bring STEM students and professionals together in regional areas for networking. So many of us live in the big capital cities and we get access to many networking events and conferences that are held in our big cities, but unfortunately women in STEM in regional areas don't get this sort of access at their, in their hometowns. They have to fly places. So what we're trying to do is host networking events in regional locations. But to add to that, we're not creating the circle atmosphere where you have to break into a circle. We're doing this via walking. So walking along the beach, walking through university campuses, walking through gardens. So we have had lots of feedback about how those networking events are much easier to talk to people because you're not face to face, you're side by side and you're walking together. So if you can, please join us at one of our upcoming STEM strolls. We will have more available, but the 3 that are currently open at the moment are 29th of August on the Sunshine Coast. I'll be there. 4th of October at Shoalhaven and 8th of October in Chinchilla. Now, panel, before I close today, is there any closing remarks you'd like to share?
I'd add, you never know if you never try. And I'm alive, and if you haven't gathered, I've probably had a few not so successful networking opportunities, but it's about giving it a go, putting yourself out there. You're not always going to get it 100% right, but the benefits for yourself and your confidence, but also the people that you can meet that can shape your path and also where you end up and what you can value add in your career goes beyond what you can imagine. So I really encourage you to give it a go, and all the very best.
Thanks, Sarah. Anita, any final words of wisdom?
I think along the same lines that it's going to feel difficult when you start, and there'll be times even when you're experienced that it's going to be feeling awkward and difficult, and that's okay, because that's where the true learning is. Jump out of your comfort zone. The learning and growth is just out of your comfort zone.
Excellent. Thanks, Anita. Hara?
Yep, echoing both Sarah's and Anita's points. Yeah, go forward and conquer. It's not always gonna be awkward. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. But just keep trying.
Excellent. Thank you. Now you've all got your first network here online, so please feel free to connect with each other. But if you'd like to connect with us at Women in STEM Australia, our contact details are on the screen. You can follow up with questions, feedback, or suggestions for further online events or in-person events. So thank you for your time this afternoon and have a good evening.